The conference room floated in silence, suspended in the cold vacuum of space. Outside the massive windows, stars burned with ancient light, indifferent to the drama unfolding within. Do-hyun Kim sat at the curved table, his hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. His shoulders were hunched, his gray hair thin and wispy. He wore simple clothes, a plain jacket that hung loose on his frame. To anyone watching, he looked like someone's grandfather who had wandered into the wrong room. Across from him sat two figures that would haunt anyone's nightmares. Tekvar of the Krenth Empire stood nearly 8 feet tall, his scaled body covered in scars that told stories of 100 battles. His species had evolved from apex predators, and every movement reminded everyone in the room of that fact. Beside him, Vixilan of the Sorath Collective perched on a specialized seat, her 4 wings folded but ready, her taloned hands resting on the table like weapons waiting to be drawn. Her people had ruled the skies of their world, and then the space above it. She looked at humans the way a hawk looks at mice. Behind Do-hyun stood Commander Ji-won Park and Officer Yoon-seo Choi. They were everything Do-hyun was not. Ji-won was tall and broad-shouldered, her uniform crisp and decorated with medals from a dozen conflicts. Her hand rested casually on the plasma pistol at her hip. Yoon-seo was younger but no less dangerous, his eyes constantly scanning the room for threats, his posture that of a coiled spring. They looked like they could tear through the station's hull with their bare hands. The alien's eyes kept drifting to them. Of course they did. You have 48 hours, Tekvar said, his voice like grinding stone. 12 colony worlds. You will evacuate them and turn over all facilities intact. This is not negotiation. This is mercy. Do-hyun took a small sip of his cold tea and grimaced slightly. Forgive me, he said quietly. Could you perhaps explain which colonies? I am not familiar with all the designations. Vixilan's feathers ruffled with irritation. Your species has been provided with the full list 3 times. Perhaps you should send someone more competent to these discussions. Ah, yes, Do-hyun said, nodding apologetically. He fumbled with a data pad, nearly dropping it. I am old. My memory is not what it was. But perhaps while I find the list, you could tell me about your cultures. I have always been fascinated by the Krenth Empire. Your people have such a rich history of expansion. How many systems do you currently control? Tekvar blinked slowly, confused by the shift in conversation. 347 systems, he said. What does this have to do with 347? Remarkable. Do-hyun smiled like a delighted child. And the Sorath Collective? I imagine your people's ability to traverse space quickly gives you control over even more territory. Vixilan's eyes narrowed, but there was pride in her voice. 412 systems. We have expanded more efficiently than the Krenth, who rely on brute force rather than strategic superiority. Brute force? Tekvar's scales rattled, a sign of anger in his species. We have held our territories for 6 centuries while your collective has existed for barely 3. Held them, yes, Vixilan said coldly. While we have grown, perhaps the difference between stagnation and progress. Do-hyun made a small sound of interest. 6 centuries and 3 centuries, both very impressive by human standards. Tell me, do your empires share many border systems? I imagine with such successful expansion, you must be neighbors in several regions. Both aliens turned to look at him, their argument momentarily forgotten. We share 73 border systems, Tekvar said slowly. Why does this matter? Oh, no reason, Do-hyun said, waving his hand dismissively. I simply find it interesting how civilizations interact. You have been neighbors for so long and now work together so well. It speaks to great diplomatic skill. Was it difficult to form this alliance? Vixilan's talons clicked on the table. Our alliance was formed because humanity represents a threat that requires joint action. We put aside our differences for the greater good. What differences? Do-hyun asked innocently. Surely 2 such noble civilizations have much in common. The Krenth are barely civilized, Vixilan said. They solve problems with violence rather than intelligence. The Sorath are cowards who hide behind technology. Tekvar growled. They have never faced an enemy with honor. Behind Do-hyun, Ji-won shifted her weight, her hand tightening on her weapon. The aliens immediately focused on her, their bodies tensing. Yoon-seo took a small step forward, and both aliens' personal guards reached for their own weapons. Please, Do-hyun said softly, and something in his voice made everyone pause. Commander Park is simply adjusting her stance. She has been standing for a long time. Perhaps we could all take a small break. I need to use the facilities, I'm afraid. At my age, the bladder is not reliable. The tension broke, replaced by disgust and dismissal. These mighty warriors, these conquerors of systems, looked at the frail old man and saw nothing worth fearing. The break lasted 20 minutes. When they reconvened, Do-Yun asked more questions. He wanted to know about supply lines and resource distribution. He wondered about the military structures of both empires. He asked about their political systems, their methods of command, their relationships with other species. Each question seemed random, the curiosity of an old academic who had wandered into politics by accident. The aliens grew more frustrated with each passing minute. They had come to deliver an ultimatum, to watch humanity crumble before their combined might. Instead, they were answering pointless questions from a man who could barely hold his teacup steady. Finally, Thekvar stood. Enough, 48 hours. Evacuate the colonies or we will remove your species from them by force. There will be no further discussion. Vixelan rose as well. Your military commanders here understand the reality of the situation even if you do not, old man. We have 600 combined fleets. You have perhaps 50. The mathematics are simple. Do-Yun nodded sadly. Yes. I will take your message to my government. Thank you for your patience with an old fool. As the aliens left, their guards surrounding them, Ji-won leaned down to Do-Hyun. Sir, they are going to attack. We should begin evacuation procedures. Do-Hyun took another sip of tea and Unseo noticed that his hands were no longer shaking. No evacuations, Commander. Begin Phase 2. Phase 2, sir? Do-Hyun smiled, and for just a moment Unseo saw something in that smile that made his blood run cold. It was the smile of a man who had already won a game that no one else knew they were playing. Yes, Do-Hyun said quietly. Now we wait and watch them destroy each other. Outside the window, the alien ships began to move into formation, massive and terrible and completely unaware that they had already lost. 3 months had passed since the deadline. The Galactic Council station still orbited its neutral moon, but the atmosphere had changed. Where once there had been tension and the promise of war, now there was an uneasy peace. Or perhaps not peace. Perhaps just the absence of open conflict, which was not the same thing at all. Young Ji-Han walked through the diplomatic quarters, her steps quick and nervous. She was 24 years old, fresh from the diplomatic academy, and she had been assigned as an assistant to the most successful human diplomat in the service. She should have been thrilled. Instead, she was terrified. Everyone knew the stories about Do-Hyun Kim, the man who had never lost a negotiation, the diplomat who had turned certain disasters into unexpected victories. But no one seemed to know how he did it. There were rumors, of course. Some said he bribed officials. Others claimed he had access to intelligence networks that gave him unfair advantages. A few suggested he was simply lucky. Young Ji knew none of those explanations were true, but she did not know what the truth was. That was what frightened her. She found him in a small garden that had been created on the station, real plants shipped at enormous expense from Earth. Do-Hyun knelt beside a small bush, pruning it with careful attention. He looked up as she approached and smiled warmly. Ah, Young Ji, right on time. Come sit with me. I have tea. She sat on a bench while he poured from a simple ceramic pot. The tea was plain green tea, nothing special. They drank in silence for a moment. You requested this assignment, Do-Hyun said finally. Yes, sir. I wanted to learn from the best. The best, he smiled at that. Tell me, what do you think makes a good diplomat? Young Ji had prepared for this question. Intelligence. Knowledge of cultures and politics. The ability to read people and situations. Strategic thinking. All true, Do-Hyun agreed, but incomplete. Would you like to know what I think is most important? Yes, sir. Patience, and the ability to understand what people truly want, as opposed to what they say they want. Young Ji frowned. I do not understand the difference. Do-Hyun gestured to the garden around them. These plants want sunlight and water. If I give them too much or too little, they suffer, but they cannot tell me directly what they need. I must watch them, learn their patterns, understand the signs of health and distress. Only then can I help them grow. Sir, people are not plants. No, but the principle is the same. The Krenth say they want territory and resources, but what they truly want is respect. They are a warrior culture that feels the galaxy no longer takes them seriously. The Sorath claim they want strategic advantage, but what they truly want is security. They are a species that evolved as prey and they never feel safe. no matter how powerful they become. So you gave them what they really wanted instead of what they asked for. I helped them see paths to getting what they wanted that did not require them to go through humanity. The Krenth and Sorath formed their alliance because both felt threatened by human expansion. But they also feared and mistrusted each other. Those fears were real. I simply made sure those fears were more visible than the threat we posed. Youngji took a sip of tea, thinking. The stories say you manipulated them, tricked them. Do you think that is what happened? I do not know what happened. That is why I am here. I want to understand your methods. Do-yun was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost sad. I will tell you a secret, Youngji. I do not have a special method. I do not have secret intelligence or hidden advantages. What I have is time. I spend years studying cultures, not just reading about them, but truly trying to understand how they think. I learn their histories, their fears, their dreams. And when I sit down at a negotiation table, I am not trying to defeat them. I am trying to help them find what they need in a way that does not harm us. But the Krenth and Sorath alliance collapsed. Their fleets did not attack because they became suspicious of each other. Their fleets did not attack because the foundation of their alliance was built on fear rather than trust. I did not create that weakness. It was always there. I simply made sure they could see it clearly. He paused. Do you think what I did was wrong? Youngji considered carefully. I think what you did prevented a war, but I also think it was manipulation. Yes, it was. And that is something you must understand if you want to do this work. Diplomacy at the highest level is not about being honest and fair. It is about protecting your people using whatever tools you have available. Sometimes those tools are treaties and trade agreements. Sometimes they are careful words that help others see uncomfortable truths about themselves. A message chimed on Do-yun's data pad. He glanced at it and his expression shifted almost imperceptibly. The Krenth have just signed a non-aggression pact with humanity. They are offering us favorable trade terms on several key resources. Why would they do that? Because they want us to favor them over the Sorath. They are competing for our friendship now instead of planning our destruction. In 6 months, the Sorath will make a similar offer, trying to outbid the Krenth. We will accept both offers and remain neutral. Both empires will have what they truly wanted all along. Security through alliance with us, and we will have what we needed. Safety and prosperity. Youngji shook her head slowly. You planned this, all of it. From the moment you walked into that first negotiation. Not planned, anticipated. There is a difference. I understood the forces at work and I made small adjustments to help them flow in directions that would not harm us. Like water finding its path down a mountain. I did not create the mountain or the water. I simply cleared a few stones from one path and placed them in another. Captain Minho says you are the most dangerous person he has ever met. Do-hyun smiled at that. Minho is a good man. We served together during difficult times. He saw me make hard choices and he has never forgotten the cost of those choices. The smile faded. Do you know how many beings died in the wars I helped start 30 years ago? Wars you helped start? Yes. Millions died because I amplified conflicts between alien species. I did it to save humanity from extinction. But those beings are still dead. Their families still mourn them. I carry that weight every day of my life. But you continue doing this work, because the alternative is worse. The galaxy is not a peaceful place, Youngji. It is full of species competing for resources and territory. Some are more aggressive than others, but all of them will expand at someone else's expense if given the chance. Humanity is young and weak compared to most of them. We survive not by being strong, but by being necessary, by being the neutral party, the mediator, the species that everyone needs to be friends with because we make the whole system work better. He poured more tea for both of them. That is the real secret. Not manipulation, not tricks. We survive by making ourselves indispensable. And we do that by understanding others better than they understand themselves and helping them solve their problems in ways that coincidentally help us as, well, Commander G1 and Officer. Yoon Seo had arrived on the station that morning. Youngji had seen them in the corridors, impressive and intimidating in their uniforms. They were heading to new assignments, negotiations with the Ixlar and Plenor respectively. Why do you always have military officers with you in negotiations? Youngji asked. Because everyone expects the obvious threat. They see people like Commander Park and Officer Choi and they focus on them. They watch the weapons and the muscles and the metals. They calculate military balances and strategic advantages, and while they are doing that, they do not notice the old man asking questions about their culture and history. I am most effective when I am invisible, but you are not invisible. Everyone knows your name now. They know my name, but they do not see me. Not really. They see an old man who has been lucky in his career. They see a harmless academic who stumbled into diplomacy. They do not see the pattern. They do not understand that every question has a purpose and every conversation is moving pieces on a board they cannot see. Youngji felt a chill. Are you moving pieces with me right now? Is this conversation part of some larger plan? Do-hyun looked at her with genuine warmth. No, Youngji. This is a teacher talking to a student. I am old, I will not do this work forever. Someone will need to come after me. Someone who understands that the deadliest weapon humanity has is not our ships or our weapons. It is our ability to understand and work with beings who are different from us. I do not know if I can do what you do. You do not have to do what I do. You have to find your own way. But you must understand the fundamental truth. In any room, the most dangerous person is never the one everyone is watching. It is the one everyone ignores. Remember that, and you will serve humanity well. They sat in silence then, drinking tea in a garden that should not exist, on a station floating in the void of space. An old man and a young woman, a teacher and a student, one carrying the weight of millions of deaths and the survival of a species, the other just beginning to understand what she had signed up for. Somewhere in the station, alien diplomats prepared for new negotiations. They would face Commander Jiwon or Officer Unseo, impressive in their military bearing. The secure briefing room aboard the Quiet Dawn was designed to prevent any form of surveillance. No signals could enter or leave. The walls themselves could reconfigure to prevent sound transmission. It was a room built for secrets, and Captain Minho had activated every security protocol before allowing Suji inside. Now she sat across from him, watching files appear on the holographic display between them. Files that showed a version of history she had never learned in school. This is the year 2237, Minho said, bringing up images of Earth's early colony worlds. Humanity had 63 colonies across 18 systems. We thought we were doing well, expanding carefully, establishing ourselves among the stars. Then we met the Ixlar, then the Velen, then the Krenth, the Sorath, and the Plenor Dominion. 5 major civilizations, each one controlling hundreds of systems, each one far more advanced than us. The display shifted to show star maps. Human space was a tiny cluster surrounded by vast empires. They met here, Minho continued, highlighting a station in neutral space. The 5-Power Summit. They discussed what to do about the human problem. They decided we were too aggressive, too unpredictable. Our expansion needed to be stopped before we became a real threat. They were going to attack us. Worse, they were going to divide us. The Krenth would take some colonies, the Ixlar others. They would leave us with Earth and perhaps Mars. Enough to survive, not enough to matter. It was very civilized, very rational. It would have meant the end of human expansion for centuries, maybe forever. Suji felt cold. Why did I never learn about this? Because it never happened. At least not in any way that most people know about. Enter Do-hyun Kim, age 29, junior intelligence analyst. He was brought into a meeting with the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Secretary of Defense. They wanted intelligence assessments of alien military capabilities. They were planning for a war they could not win. The display changed to show a young man in a military uniform. Suji barely recognized him as Do-hyun. He was lean and intense, his eyes sharp. Nothing like the gentle old man she had met. He told them they were asking the wrong question, Minho said. The question was not how to win a war. The question was how to make sure there was no war. And if there had to be a war, how to make sure it was not with us. What did he propose? Minho pulled up a document labeled Operation Fractured Mirror. The proposal was dense and complex, but the core was simple and terrifying. He wanted to turn them against each other. Not with obvious attacks or false flags. Those would be discovered. Instead, he proposed a 5-year operation to identify and exploit existing tensions, to amplify natural conflicts, to help each species see the others as threats greater than humanity. The room was silent for a moment. Then Suji said, "That is psychological warfare on a scale I cannot even comprehend." Yes, and the Joint Chiefs thought he was insane. But the Secretary of Defense was desperate. She gave him 6 months and a small team. If he could show results, the operation would continue. If not, they would begin military preparations for a losing war. The display showed a new file. This is 3 months into the operation. The Ixlar Confederacy discovers that the Velen Commonwealth has been secretly surveying mineral-rich systems that the Ixlar had claimed by ancient territorial rights. It causes a diplomatic incident. Do-hyun arranged that. He did not arrange it. The Velen really were surveying those systems, but they were doing it quietly, planning to negotiate later. Do-hyun simply made sure the Ixlar found out in the worst possible way, through channels that made it look like the Velen were trying to hide their intentions. The Ixlar felt betrayed. The Velen felt unfairly accused. A small conflict became a major crisis. More files appeared showing a cascade of incidents, trade disputes, border violations, intelligence leaks, cultural insults. None of them fabricated, all of them real issues that already existed. Do-hyun had simply found them, amplified them, and made sure they happened at exactly the right time to cause maximum damage to interspecies relationships. The Krenth Empire and the Sorath Collective both claimed a system called Tarvin. It had been disputed for decades, but both sides had agreed to ignore it in favor of their bigger concerns. Do-hyun made sure that information about Tarvin's strategic importance reached both sides at the same time. Suddenly, neither side could afford to back down without looking weak. He was playing 5 civilizations against each other simultaneously. Yes, and it worked. Within 18 months, the 5-Power Summit had collapsed. The Ixlar and Velen went to war over mineral rights. The Krenth and Sorath nearly went to war over Tarvin, only backing down when the Plenor Dominion threatened to support whichever side agreed to share resources with them. That led to 3-way negotiations that broke down into accusations and recriminations. Captain Minho brought up casualty reports. The wars lasted 4 years. Millions died. Entire colonies were destroyed. And through it all, humanity remained neutral. We offered humanitarian aid. We mediated disputes. We sold supplies to all sides at fair prices. We became the Switzerland of the galaxy, indispensable to everyone. Suji felt sick. Millions died because of what Do-hyun did. Millions died because 5 empires decided to fight each other instead of exterminating humanity. Minho corrected. Would you prefer the alternative? Humanity confined to a single system. Our colony stripped away, our species forever locked in a cage made by powers greater than ourselves? There had to be another way, perhaps, but no one found it. Do-hyun did what he did with full knowledge of the cost. I have read his personal journals from that time. They are part of the classified files. He did not sleep well. He understood the weight of every decision. A new file appeared marked with the highest classification symbols. This is Admiral Haijin Nam's final report on Operation Fractured Mirror. She was Do-hyun's commanding officer during the later years. She wrote this after the wars ended. Suji read the words slowly. The architect has given humanity a future at a cost measured in alien blood. He has proven that our species' greatest weapon is not our technology or our courage, but our ability to understand and manipulate the psychology of others. We must never forget what was done. We must never be proud of it, but we must also never hesitate to use it again if our survival demands it. After the wars ended, Do-hyun disappeared from military service, Minho said. He returned to civilian life, became a professor just like his official file says. For 20 years, he taught literature and philosophy to students who had no idea what he had done. Then the Velen Commonwealth started making aggressive moves toward human space again. Someone in the government remembered Architect 7. They asked him to come back, but only as a diplomat. No more military operations, no more wars, and he agreed. He did. But he brought his methods with him. Every negotiation, every diplomatic mission. He does the same thing now that he did then. He finds the tensions that already exist. He amplifies them. He makes sure that everyone is too busy watching each other to threaten humanity. And he does it so carefully, so gently, that no one realizes it is happening. Suji looked at the image of young Do-hyun again, then thought of the old man drinking tea. How does someone carry that burden for so long? I do not know, Minho said quietly, but I am grateful that he does. Because the galaxy is not a kind place. It is not a place where the peaceful survive simply because they wish to live in peace. It is a place where the clever survive by making sure others are fighting battles that do not involve them. The display faded, leaving them in the dim light of the secure room. Outside, the ship continued its journey toward Earth. carrying an old man who had saved humanity twice and was preparing to do it again, while almost no one knew his name or understood what he had sacrificed to keep them safe. The human ship, Quiet Dawn, moved through space like a whisper, its engines barely disturbing the fabric of reality as it made its way back toward Earth. In the intelligence section, Suji Kang sat surrounded by holographic displays, watching recordings of the negotiation for the 15th time. Something was wrong. No, not wrong. Something was too right. She paused the footage at the moment when Do-hyun had asked about border systems. The old man's face showed innocent curiosity, nothing more. But the aliens' responses had given away the exact location of 73 potential conflict points between their empires. She moved forward through the recording. Another innocent question about supply lines. The aliens had responded with pride, each trying to prove their superiority, and in doing so had revealed their resource dependencies and vulnerabilities. Every single question. Every rambling digression. Every moment when the old diplomat had seemed confused or forgetful. Each one had extracted precise, valuable intelligence. "Computer, show me Diplomat Kim's previous negotiations," Suji said. Files appeared before her. 3 years ago, negotiations with the Ixlar Confederacy over mining rights. Do-hyun had appeared in those recordings as well, always in the background, always asking his pointless questions. The Ixlar had gone home confident they had secured favorable terms. 6 months later, market fluctuations that seemed completely unrelated had made those mining rights worthless to the Ixlar, but incredibly valuable to humanity. 2 years ago, trade discussions with the Velen Commonwealth. Again, Do-hyun was there. Again, he seemed like the least important person in the room. The Commonwealth had celebrated their victory in securing a trade route. 8 months later, political shifts in 3 neighboring systems had made that route the only stable passage through that entire sector. Humanity now controlled the single most important trade corridor in the region. Computer, access Diplomat Kim Do-hyun's personnel file. The file appeared. Born in Busan, Earth in the year 2219. Studied literature and philosophy at university. Became a professor. Joined the diplomatic corps in 2262 at the age of 43. A late career change. His record showed steady, unremarkable service. Assignments to minor negotiations. Nothing spectacular. Just an academic who had decided to serve his species in his middle age. But there were gaps. Dates that did not connect properly. References to postings that had no detail attached. Classification markers that seemed far too high for a simple literature professor, turned minor diplomat. Suji stood and made her way through the ship's corridors to the captain's quarters. She pressed the chime and waited. Captain Min-ho Lee opened the door. He was in his 50s, his hair graying at the temples, his face marked with the weathering that came from decades in space. "Analyst Kang, it is late. Sir, I need to ask you about Diplomat Kim." Something changed in Minho's expression. The tired ship captain vanished, replaced by something harder, more alert. "Come in, close the door." The captain's quarters were spare and functional. Minho poured 2 glasses of water and sat down heavily. "What have you found?" "Patterns, sir. Every negotiation he has been part of, humanity has gained advantages that were not apparent at the time. And his file has gaps, classifications. I think there is something we are not being told about who he really is." Minho was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "How old are you, analyst?" 28, sir." "Then you were a child during the contact wars. You probably do not even remember them." Suji frowned. "Sir, there were no contact wars. First contact with alien species was peaceful. Tense at times, but peaceful. That is what the history books say now," Minho said. "That is what most people believe. But I was there in the early days. I was a junior officer on a patrol ship when 5 alien species met to discuss the partition of human space. They had decided, you see, that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to expand, too aggressive, too unpredictable. They were going to divide our colony worlds among themselves and confine us to the Sol system. But that never happened. No, it never happened, because of a young intelligence officer named Do-hyun Kim. He was barely 30 years old. Most of the command staff thought he was insane. He kept saying we could not win a war, so we had to make sure there was no war to win." Minho stood and went to his personal safe. He entered a code that took nearly 30 seconds to complete. From inside, he withdrew a data chip that looked old and worn. This is classified at levels that technically do not exist. I have kept it all these years as a reminder of what we were, of what we almost lost, of what one man saved us from. He inserted the chip into his terminal. Files appeared, marked with classification symbols that made Suji's eyes widen. I should not be seeing this. No, Minho agreed. But if you are going to work with Do-hyun, you need to understand what you are working with. Who you are working with. The files contained reports from Human Intelligence Services during the years 2237 to 2242. Operations, with codenames like Scattered Seeds and Whispered Doubts. Records of information carefully leaked to Species A about Species B's intentions. Trade deals structured to create dependencies. Cultural exchanges designed to introduce concepts that would cause internal political conflicts. And at the center of it all, a designation. Architect 7. He built it all, Minho said quietly. Every piece of the current galactic order. The 5 species that were going to partition humanity, within 3 years they were at war with each other. Not because we attacked them, because we helped them see that their real enemies were each other. We provided evidence of betrayals that were already being planned. We highlighted old grievances. We made sure that every species was more afraid of their allies than of humanity. That is manipulation. That is wrong, is it? Minho asked. We were facing extinction. Do-hyun gave us a path to survival that did not require us to become monsters. No humans died in his war. No human ships fired a shot. Instead, we became the neutral observers. The mediators. The traders who sold to all sides. By the time the wars ended, humanity was not a threat to be eliminated. We were the indispensable center of galactic commerce and diplomacy. Suji looked at the recordings again, seeing them with new eyes. The frail old man asking his innocent questions. The current crisis with the Krenth and Sorath. He is doing it again. Yes, Minho said. He is doing it again. And we are going to help him by being exactly what everyone expects us to be. What is that? The obvious threat. The military force that everyone watches while Do-hyun does the real work. Minho smiled without humor. Did you notice how both aliens kept looking at Commander Park and Officer Choi during the negotiation? How they barely paid attention to Do-hyun because they looked dangerous. Exactly. And while they were watching the obvious danger, they never saw the real one. They answered every question. They revealed everything Do-hyun needed to know. And now he has all the pieces to ensure they will never attack us. How can you be sure? Because I have seen him work for 30 years. That gentle old man who drinks tea and asks about cultural histories, he is the most dangerous human being alive. He just makes sure no one knows it until it is far too late. Outside the window, stars drifted past. Somewhere in the dark, alien fleets were gathering, confident in their strength. They had no idea they were already dancing to a tune composed by a literature professor who had decided that the pen was not just mightier than the sword, but invisible until it had already rewritten the entire story. The Krenth border fortress hung in space like a clenched fist, bristling with weapons and surrounded by warships. Inside the command center, Tekvar reviewed deployment orders for the 1,000th time. 600 ships between the Krenth Empire and the Sorath Collective. Humanity had perhaps 50 vessels capable of real combat. The mathematics were simple. Overwhelming force, certain victory, so why did he feel uneasy? Admiral, one of his subordinates said, we have received the final deployment coordinates from the Sorath fleet. Tekvar pulled up the tactical display. The Sorath ships were positioned along the agreed route toward human space. But something about their formation bothered him. They were spread thin across multiple vectors. Efficient for covering territory, certainly, but also positioned perfectly to cut off Krenth supply lines if they turned hostile. This is the formation the Sorath agreed to? He asked. Yes, Admiral. It matches their proposal from 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, before humanity had given their official response. Before the deadline had been set. The Sorath had been planning this formation before the negotiation had even concluded. Why? Across the void, in a Sorath war nest that drifted like a massive living thing through space, Commander Vixilan studied the same tactical displays with growing concern. The Krenth fleet was assembled, yes, but their positioning was aggressive. They were not simply preparing to move toward human colonies. They were arranged in a formation that could easily pivot to strike at Sorath border worlds. Why would they need that many heavy assault ships for dealing with humans? She asked her second in command. Perhaps they anticipate resistance, Commander. 50 human ships against 600 of ours. They would need every vessel humanity possesses to pose a real threat. No, this formation is designed for something else. Something larger. She accessed secure communications and sent a message to the Sorath High Council. Request intelligence assessment on Krenth intentions post-human compliance. Verify alliance stability. On the Galactic Council station in a chamber designed for emergency sessions, representatives from 24 species gathered. Dohyun sat near the back, looking even more frail than usual. He had requested this session, claiming he had new information relevant to the crisis. The council director, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline matrix, addressed the assembly. Diplomat Kim has asked to present evidence regarding the Krenth Sorath demands on humanity. The floor is yours, Diplomat. Dohyun stood slowly as if his bones ached. He approached the central display platform, carrying a data chip with shaking hands. Thank you, Director. I hope this is not a waste of the Council's time. I am just a simple man, but I found some information that troubles me. He inserted the chip. Documents appeared in the holographic space above the platform. Trade records, fleet movements, communications, all from public sources, nothing classified. But arranged in a specific way, they told a story. These are records of Krenth resource acquisitions over the past 6 months, Dohyun said. You will notice they have been stockpiling materials used in long-term occupation. Not just military supplies, but civilian infrastructure components, enough to establish permanent bases across many systems. A representative from the Ixlar Confederacy leaned forward. That is more than they would need for 12 human colonies. Yes, Dohyun agreed. Much more. And these are Sorath communications, also public record, discussing the establishment of trade routes through territory that currently belongs to the Plenor Dominion, routes that would only be valuable if the Plenor were no longer controlling that space. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The Plenor representative stood. Are you suggesting the Krenth and Sorath plan to attack more than just humanity? I am not suggesting anything, Dohyun said. I am simply showing data. But I wonder if perhaps this alliance was not formed just to deal with humanity. Perhaps we were simply the test case, a way for them to work together before moving on to larger targets. The room erupted in debate. Dohyun returned to his seat, looking tired and confused by the reaction he had caused. The evidence he had presented was real. All of it was verifiable through public records. What he did not mention was that he had spent months identifying which records to show and how to arrange them to tell a specific story. A story that was technically true, but left out crucial context that would make the situation look less threatening. Back on the Krenth fortress, Thekvar received an urgent message from his intelligence division. Admiral, the Galactic Council is discussing allegations that our alliance with the Sorath extends beyond dealing with humanity. What allegations? That we are planning a broader campaign of expansion, that humanity is merely the first target. Thekvar felt his scales tighten with anger. That is absurd. Where are these claims coming from? From the human diplomat. He presented trade records and communications to the council. What records? Show me. The data appeared on his screens. Thekvar looked at it and felt his anger shift to confusion, then to cold realization. The records were accurate. Those were genuine Krenth acquisitions. But the quantities were not excessive. They were normal for an empire their size. Only when taken out of context and compared to the needs of occupying 12 small colonies did they look suspicious. This is manipulation, he said. The humans are trying to undermine our alliance with the Sorath. Perhaps, Admiral. But we have also received this. Another message appeared. It was from a Sorath admiral, marked urgent and confidential. It asked pointed questions about Krenth intentions after humanity was dealt with. It mentioned concerns about fleet positioning and strategic goals. The Sorath are questioning our loyalty, Thekvar said slowly, because of information the humans leaked to the council. In her war nest, Vixilan was reaching the same conclusion. The humans are trying to divide us. That old diplomat, the harmless one. He is not harmless at all. Her second-in-command nodded. Should we contact the Krenth? Assure them of our continued alliance? Vixilan considered this. But such contact could look like weakness. And the Krenth fleet positioning was genuinely concerning. What if they were planning betrayal? The humans had not created that suspicious formation. They had simply pointed it out. Send a message to our fleet commanders, she said finally. Maintain current positions but increase defensive readiness. If the Krenth make any aggressive moves, I want us prepared to respond. On Earth, Commander Jiwon Park received orders directly from military command. She was to take a fleet of 30 ships, humanity's largest mobile force, and move them to defensive positions around the threatened colonies. Make it visible. Make it obvious. Give the aliens something to watch. They want us to look scared, Officer Yunseo said, reading the orders. They want us to look like what everyone expects, Jiwon corrected. A species with its back against the wall, desperate and preparing for a fight we cannot win. While we do that, Do-Yun will be somewhere having tea and asking innocent questions. The 48-hour deadline approached. Krenth and Sorath fleets maintained their positions, but both sides had increased alert status. Communications between the two allies had become formal and cautious. Third-party species were quietly withdrawing economic support, not wanting to be associated with potential aggressors, and in a small office on the council station, Do-Hyun sat alone drinking tea and reviewing reports. The pieces were moving exactly as he had calculated, not because he had forced them to move, but because he had given them gentle nudges in directions they were already inclined to go. Fear, pride, suspicion. These were not human emotions. They were universal, and every intelligent species thought they were immune to their own feelings until those feelings were carefully, precisely, invisibly amplified. The deadline came and went. No fleets moved. No shots were fired. Instead, the Krenth and Sorath quietly began repositioning their forces, not toward humanity but into defensive postures against each other. The alliance held technically, but it was fragile now, compromised by doubts that would grow with time. Humanity remained exactly where it had been, untouched, unthreatened. Watching empires dance to music only one old man could hear.